the House of Representatives races now. District 14, Representative Keith Esau, the Republican, versus Merlin Ring, the Democrat. And the first candidate up will be Merlin Ring. And you will have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
My name is Merlin Ring. I'm the Democratic candidate for State Representative District 14. Thanks to the Public Policy Council for sponsoring this event and allowing me to present my views. I believe we can do better in the Kansas legislature. I've lived and worked in Johnson County for over 40 years, and my wife Beverly and I have raised 2 children here. I've always been an advocate for children. I've been a soccer coach, a Boy Scout leader, a Science Olympiad mentor. I'm a retired engineer from Lenexa Aerospace Company. If elected, I'll work to implement a tax policy that funds programs representing our shared values. These include providing a quality education for our kids, building and maintaining a first-class infrastructure, and providing access to affordable health care and a safety net for our most vulnerable citizens. These are the things that foster economic growth. I'm asking for your vote on November 8th to get Kansas back on track for the common sense values we've been known for.
Okay, first question for 1 minute. What are your views on the budget and state tax policy? Are there tax or spending policies that you would add or change? And please be specific.
Okay, I would, as far as tax policy is concerned, I would go back to the tax policy as it was in 2012 and repeal the small business tax exemption. I ran for the District 9 Senate seat in 2012. This is my raw card. At that time, I told the voters, historically, Kansans have paid their fair share to support services we need and the education our kids deserve. The reckless action of the Brownback-led legislative session last spring will put our schools in jeopardy and compromise our state's ability to provide basic services to the most vulnerable among us. That was 2012. In 2014, I ran for this House seat. I pointed out historic cuts to school funding, a budget deficit of $238 million projected by June 2016, bond ratings downgraded, 151,000 Kansans without insurance, and Kansas job growth lagging neighboring states.
Okay, we got to move on to the next question because of time. Question number 2 for 1 minute. What are your views on K-12 education funding in Kansas? How do you envision a new school finance formula? And would it include school vouchers, individual tax credits, or other voucher-like programs for private school tuition?
I would not support vouchers or tax credits for private schools. If elected, I will be a champion fighting for our Kansas public schools. Why public schools? It goes back to our founding principles. All persons are created equal. Being created equal means we have equal opportunity. Free public schools are the way, the method we provide for ensuring equal opportunity for all of our citizens. Earlier, Kansans understood this. That's why they wrote it into our state constitution. Our District 14 representative voted in 2016 to limit the power of the Kansas Board of Education to set curriculum standards. He has disguised this vote as an effort to give teachers more flexibility. The Kansas College and Career Ready standards outline what a student should be able to do at each grade level. House Bill 2292 limits the ability of the Kansas Board of Education to set curriculum standards as our Constitution requires.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt again. The time has expired on that question. The next question, number 3 for 1 minute. In recent years, the legislature has diverted funding dedicated to the state's transportation program to pay for other purposes. Do you support dedicating sales tax revenue to specific purposes, such as transportation? Or do you support all state expenditures, including transportation, should be subject to the appropriations process where legislators determine the funding levels entirely?
I would support maintaining the current system of allocating sales tax. In order to balance the state general fund, $2.1 billion has been borrowed from KDOT Highway Fund. Over $1 billion in road projects have been delayed. We'll soon be seeing the results of deteriorating roads and bridges. While saving $1 now, we'll spend 10 in the future. Also, it has been announced that Kansas has been ranked 49th in construction jobs. That's while losing 3,400 jobs in the past year. Meanwhile, our neighboring states have added 20,000 jobs. Transportation and associated infrastructure are critical to a healthy and growing economy. It is a key component of attracting new industry and associated jobs. Again, we need a tax policy that funds our public transportation infrastructure and ends the borrowing from the road fund.
Okay, next question for 1 minute. What are your views on local control, including recent legislation limiting local government property tax revenues without a public vote?
Our state legislature must respect the prerogatives of local government to govern on local issues. The lid on property taxes is an example of state overreach. The incumbent, Mr. Esau, voted to prevent local government from exercising their rightful discretion to raise revenues to provide the services expected by their constituents. He has proposed that the property tax lid will save $1.6 billion. If true, we might logically also infer that $1.6 billion will not be available in services expected by our residents. The vote will also require local government to fund the cost of elections on the property tax referendum when they have already voted for leaders to make this decision. I'm in favor of lowering property taxes, but not at the expense of local control.
And the closing question for 1 minute. What is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
In closing, I'm asking for your votes in the upcoming election. I'll work hard to represent the best interest of my District 12 constituents in Topeka. I don't have all the answers, but I'm a lifelong learner and will approach problems in a pragmatic, common sense way while seeking openness and transparency. I will communicate and seek input from my constituents of every party in a bipartisan fashion. In 1948, 1984, my daughter and I did the bike across Kansas. We rode our bicycles from west of Scott City to east of Pittsburgh over an 8-day period. We spent nights on sleeping bags in high school gyms along the way. I gained an appreciation for the beauty of our state and the pride that Kansans have in their public schools, just like we do here in Johnson County. It will be a great honor to represent you in our legislature. Thank you for listening and thank you for your vote.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Representative Keith Esau. And you have 1 minute for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Chamber for inviting us to this forum. I'm a fourth-generation Kansan. My great-grandfather was the first of his family to be born in America. They were part of the immigrants who brought over the turkey red winter wheat to Kansas that has made Kansas one of the breadbasket of the U.S. I grew up in a small town. I helped farm wheat and even worked on a harvest crew one summer in western Kansas. All this helped instill into me an understanding of the strength of what the strengths and challenges are in our rural areas of the state outside Johnson County. And like many others, my wife and I moved to Johnson County about 29 years ago because of a job opportunity. I got involved in politics a few years after I moved here because I wanted to see Kansas stay strong and wanted to be a part of making Kansas strong. For the last 4 years, I've had the honor of serving District 14 in Topeka.
All right. I'm sure this will be a surprise, but the first question is, what are your views on the budget and state tax policy? Are there tax or spending policies that you would add or change, and please be specific?
I've always been an advocate of the national fair tax, and I'd like to see our taxes in Kansas reflect that same sort of structure. We need to broaden our sales tax base so that we have a more steady base. Unlike a lot of other states, Kansas was one of the handful of states whose sales tax revenue and overall state tax revenue went up this last year instead of going down. The problem that all states are having, not just Kansas, is estimating sales tax, and it's because we need to get rid of many of the sales tax exemptions that we have and broaden that base.
Next question. What are your views on K-12 education funding in Kansas? How do you envision a new school finance formula? And would it include school vouchers, individual tax credits, or other voucher-like programs for private school tuition?
I am not a big fan of vouchers per se, but I do think that the money needs to follow the student. Any formula we have needs to be allocated on a student basis and not just on a district basis. We need to separate our school tax into two categories: that which is needed for the public schools infrastructure and that which is needed to educate the kids in the classroom and make sure that the money that we get to the kids actually gets to the classroom.
Next question, again for 1 minute. In recent years, the legislature has diverted funding dedicated to the state transportation program to pay for other purposes. Do you support dedicating sales tax revenue to specific purposes such as transportation, or do you support all state expenditures, including transportation, should be subject to the appropriations process where legislators determine the funding levels entirely?
I understand part of why they wanted the sales tax dedicated to the roads was to ensure that our roads stay strong. And we have some of the best roads in the nation. Our maintenance on our roads ranks higher than what it's supposed to be. We are ranked actually 4th in the nation for maintenance on roads. The big problem that people are coming up with is that we are not building enough new roads. Well, I'm not sure that the transportation department is the best place to decide whether to build new roads or not. I think that responsibility should be given back to the legislature like it is in most states.
Next question for 1 minute. What are your views on local control, including recent legislation limiting local government property tax revenues without a public vote?
One of the things that I heard from people long before I got in the legislature was they were tired of their property taxes constantly going up, and especially for those on fixed income. Having it go up more than the cost of living or the general inflation rate was becoming a burden on everybody. I think it's right to give the local control even more local, and that is to the citizens instead of the cities. It protects the citizens against unnecessary increases when the cities and counties can still get their increase. They just have to ask for it. And in Olathe, I think I've only ever seen one bond issue that wasn't approved, and that was because it was a bad idea. When we had the first library proposal several years ago, people wanted something a little different than what Olathe had planned. But the citizens will support an increase if the increase is justified.
And your closing question for 1 minute. What is the most important thing that distinguishes you from your opponent in this race?
Well, I've been serving in Topeka for 4 years. It has allowed me to learn about how the process works and to be involved in some of the good and bad changes both. But My interests are in technology and infrastructure. I've translated those interests into the things I do in Topeka. I've also been endorsed by many local organizations, including Kansas for Life, the National Rifle Association, the Kansas Chamber of Commerce, and the Kansas Farm Bureau. And I look forward to serving the people of my district. And in this year, I've walked to over 12,000 voters and knocked on their doors. And I want to continue serving the people of District 14 as their representative. Thank you.
All right, Representative Keith Esau.